All right, today we're jumping into the absolutely wild story of John Bunyan. This guy went from being a total rebel to writing one of the most famous books of all time. And he did it from a prison cell. Seriously. I mean, that's the big question here, right? It just sounds impossible. How does a poor, rebellious soldier end up a world-famous author while locked up? It's this incredible story about transformation and, well, conviction. The kind of creativity that only comes from really tough times. So let's figure out how he pulled it off.
Okay, so to really get who this guy was, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning. And let me tell you, his early days were not exactly what you'd call saintly.
So, John Bunyan's story starts at the absolute bottom rung of society in England. We're talking no silver spoon, nothing. He had a really rough start, almost no formal education, which, when you think about it, makes what he did later just mind-blowing. And things moved fast for him. By the time he was just 16, he was already a soldier in the English Civil War. Can you imagine? He even had this close brush with death that must have been pretty sobering. Right after that, he gets married to this very religious woman and, well, she had no idea, but she was about to change his life forever. And look, this description isn't some hater making stuff up. These are his own words. He literally called himself lawless and rebellious. He saw himself as the ringleader for all the trouble in his town. Just a complete and total troublemaker. But then, something starts to change. This rebellious kid begins a journey that's going to completely flip his entire world upside down. Now, this wasn't some instant lightning from the sky kind of moment. It happened in stages. First, his wife brought a couple of religious books with her when they got married, and he started reading them. He started trying to clean up his act, going to church, but it didn't quite click. The real game changer? He overheard some poor women just joyfully talking about their faith, and he realized that was it. That's what he was missing, that genuine joy. So he sought out their pastor, John Gifford, who helped him figure out the rest. And you can really feel how much he was struggling inside with this quote. He wasn't just faking it. He was really, truly wrestling with who he was. And that deep feeling of, being flawed, it wasn't something that crushed him. It was the very thing that powered his incredible change. And I mean, the change was 100%. The guy who used to be the town troublemaker, now he's a deacon. His story was so compelling that hundreds of people would show up to hear him preach. The transformation was totally complete. Or was it?
Okay, this is where things get really intense, because Bunyan's new faith is about to slam right into the power of the government, and his beliefs, they're about to be put to the ultimate test.
So here's the deal. Back then, the king and the official Church of England said you needed a license to preach. Bunyan, he was like, nope. He believed his right to preach came from God, not from some king or government. And for that, they threw him in jail. The authorities basically gave him an easy out. They said, look, just promise you'll stop preaching, and you can walk out of here a free man, go home to your wife and kids. And his answer? It's just legendary. If I am freed today, I will preach tomorrow. That one sentence tells you everything you need to know about him. He was willing to sacrifice his own freedom for what he believed in. And the price he paid for that defiance was just brutal. 12.5 years in prison. And get this, not because he had a trial and was found guilty. Nope, just because he wouldn't shut up. Just let that sink in for a second. More than a decade of his life, gone. Prison was this horrible trial for him. The thought of being away from his family, especially his young daughter Mary, who was blind, it must have been agony. But somehow, that trial became his greatest triumph, because it was in that tiny cell that Bunyan the preacher transformed into Bunyan the legendary author. He literally spun his suffering into something beautiful. And what came out of that prison cell? Only one of the most famous books ever written. A total masterpiece, born from being locked away. That book is The Pilgrim's Progress. It's basically a big metaphor, an allegory. For the journey of faith, you've got characters named Faithful and places like the Slough of Despond. But here's the craziest part. He wrote it during his second stint in prison. Yeah, you heard that right. He got out, went right back to preaching without a license, got arrested again, and just picked up his pen and kept writing. And the book was a massive hit, an absolute sensation. And here's what made it so special.
At the time, most religious books were these super dense academic things that only scholars could really get into. But Bunyan, he wrote for everybody. He used simple words and told a gripping adventure story. He took all these complicated ideas and made them accessible, and people from professors to kids absolutely loved it. It was a phenomenon. So, after everything, the rebellion, the faith, the years in prison, how did John Bunyan's story end? Well, he spent his last 10 years doing exactly what he'd always fought for the right to do. He preached, he wrote, and he became this really beloved figure. He just kept traveling and ministering right up until the end. He was on a trip when he caught a fever and died pretty suddenly. He was 60 years old. And his last words, they say he said, "Take me, for I come to thee." It's like his whole life came full circle, you know? He went from a kid who was running away from God to a man running straight towards him. It's just a perfect, powerful end to a really incredible life. So Bunyan's story really makes you think, doesn't it? What is it that takes someone's personal belief and turns it into something that lasts forever? Was it the suffering he went through, his natural talent as a writer? Or was it just that stubborn, unshakable belief that what he had to say was more important than his own freedom? Maybe his life shows us that a real legacy isn't something you build in spite of your struggles, but maybe it's built because of them.